I still remember the exact moment she said it, because the entire office floor went silent right after. Not quiet in the normal corporate way, where people pretend not to listen while secretly listening to everything. I mean completely silent. Keyboards stopped clicking, phones stopped ringing. Even the espresso machine near the reception desk sounded louder than usual. And standing there in the middle of the executive hallway, holding a stack of reports I had stayed awake until 3 in the morning preparing, I heard the CEO of the company look me directly in the eyes and say, "I need a man by Monday." Then she folded her arms, tilted her head slightly, and added, "And judging by your file, you're probably not him." What she didn't know was that I had spent the last 7 years raising a little girl completely alone after my wife walked out on us. What she didn't know was that I had already survived things that would have broken most people. And what she definitely didn't know was that my reply to her would change both of our lives forever. But before I tell you what I said, tell me honestly, if someone humiliated you in front of an entire office after you sacrificed everything just to survive, would you stay quiet, or would you fight back? My name is Daniel, and 2 years ago my life was held together with coffee, unpaid bills, and the tiny hands of my 6-year-old daughter wrapped around my neck every morning before school. I wasn't supposed to end up raising a child alone. Nobody plans for that. One day you think you're building a future with someone, and the next day you're standing in a kitchen staring at a note on the counter that says, "I can't do this anymore." That was the entire goodbye my wife left behind. No explanation, no argument, no warning. Just those 6 words and an empty closet. At first I thought she'd come back. I kept checking my phone every hour like an idiot. I even left the porch light on for 3 nights straight, because part of me believed she'd walk through the door crying and apologize. She never did. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness. It was watching my daughter Emma ask questions I couldn't answer. Did mommy leave because I was bad? That question nearly destroyed me. I remember kneeling beside her tiny bed with tears burning in my eyes, while she held her stuffed rabbit against her chest. I told her none of it was her fault. I told her adults sometimes get lost inside themselves. The truth was, I was lost too. I worked as a junior financial analyst at a massive logistics company in downtown Chicago. The pay was decent if you were single and sleeping 8 hours a night. But when you're paying rent, daycare, medical bills, school supplies, and trying to keep cereal in the cabinet, decent pay disappears fast. I started taking freelance bookkeeping jobs at night after Emma went to sleep. Most nights I barely rested 3 or 4 hours. I'd wake up exhausted, make Emma pancakes shaped like little hearts because she loved those, drop her at school, then spend 10 hours in an office where nobody knew my real life. Well, almost nobody. There was one person who knew pieces of it. Her name was Claire Bennett, the CEO. Now when people hear CEO, they usually imagine some cold billionaire sitting behind a giant desk looking down at everyone. Claire wasn't like that. She was worse in some ways because she was brilliant. The kind of brilliant that made people nervous around her. She was only 38 but had transformed the company into one of the biggest transportation firms in the state. Business magazines loved her. Investors worshipped her. Employees feared her. She walked fast, talked fast, and expected perfection from everyone around her. Rumors about her spread constantly through the office. Some said she once fired a vice president during a board meeting because he showed up unprepared. Others claimed she slept 4 hours a night and answered emails at 3 in the morning, just to test who was loyal enough to respond. I didn't think someone like her even noticed people like me. Then one Thursday afternoon, everything changed. I was in conference room C, trying to fix a budget presentation that another department completely ruined. Emma's school had called twice already because she had a mild fever, and I was stressed out of my mind, trying to leave early without risking my job. Suddenly the conference room door opened and Claire walked in with 3 executives behind her. Everybody immediately stood up, except me because I was too distracted staring at my laptop screen. She noticed. "Interesting confidence," she said coldly. I stood so fast my chair nearly fell backward. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't realize." "No," she interrupted. "You realized. You were just overwhelmed. That caught me off guard. Then she looked down at my financial projections scattered across the table. She studied them silently for nearly 30 seconds. I thought she was about to criticize everything. Instead, she asked, "Who corrected the operating margin errors on page 4? I did. And who rebuilt the shipping forecast formulas? I did. One of the executives quickly jumped in and said, "He's one of the analysts from accounting." Claire kept staring at me for another moment before saying, "What's your name?" "Daniel. Stay after the meeting." Those 4 words terrified me. I was certain I was about to lose my job. Instead, after everyone left, Claire sat across from me and asked why someone at my level was doing executive-grade corrections. I shrugged. Because nobody else caught the mistakes. For the first time, I saw the corner of her mouth twitch like she was almost smiling. "You have children?" she suddenly asked. That surprised me. "One daughter. How old?" 6. She nodded slowly. "Single parent?" I hesitated before answering. "Yeah." Something changed in her expression for just a second. Not pity. Something closer to recognition. Then the walls went back up immediately. "Your work is impressive," she said. "But your confidence isn't. That's a problem." Before leaving, she told me there would be a senior operations position opening soon and I should apply. That promotion would have doubled my salary. For the first time in years, I felt hope. Over the next month, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I stayed late every night, after Emma fell asleep beside me on the office couch, because I couldn't afford extra childcare. Some nights the janitors would bring her coloring books while I finished reports. I told myself the sacrifice would be worth it. One promotion could change everything for us. And strangely, Claire started noticing me more, not in a romantic way, at least not at first. She'd stop by my desk and ask impossible questions, just to see how quickly I could answer them. Sometimes she'd criticize my work so harshly I'd feel humiliated. But then hours later she'd send an email saying, "Good recovery." It was like she was constantly testing me. One evening around 9, I was reheating macaroni for Emma in the employee kitchen. When Claire walked in, unexpectedly, she looked exhausted. Her heels were in one hand, and she was rubbing her temples. Then she noticed Emma sitting at the counter, drawing dinosaurs. Claire froze. Emma looked up innocently and said, "Hi." I almost died from embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," I started saying. "The babysitter canceled and I had deadlines and—" Claire ignored me completely and looked at Emma instead. "What's that?" she asked. Emma proudly held up the drawing. "It's a dinosaur lawyer." "A lawyer?" "Yeah, he sues meteorites." Claire actually laughed. Not a fake corporate laugh, a real one. It shocked me so much I forgot to breathe for a second. Then Emma asked the question no adult would dare ask. "Why do you look sad?" I wanted the floor to swallow me whole, but Claire just stood there quietly. Finally she said softly, "Because grown-ups make life complicated." Emma nodded seriously like she understood. "Well," she said, "my daddy says pancakes help sadness." Claire looked at me with an unreadable expression before quietly leaving the kitchen. The next morning, I found a gift card on my desk with no note attached. It was for a 24-hour childcare service near my apartment. I knew it was from her. That was when things became dangerous emotionally. Because once someone sees your struggle and helps you survive it, it becomes very easy to mistake gratitude for something deeper. Weeks later, the company announced the final interviews for the senior operations role. Everyone expected a ruthless competition. The position came directly under Claire's leadership, meaning whoever got it would work beside her daily. The interview process was brutal. Psychological evaluations, performance simulations, crisis management tests, 12-hour assessment days. Half the candidates quit before finishing. I survived all of it. Then came Friday morning, the final meeting. I walked into the executive hallway wearing the only expensive suit I owned, the same one I bought for my wedding years earlier. Claire stood near the glass conference room speaking with board members. When she saw me approaching, she dismissed everyone else. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. "I need a man by Monday." I frowned, confused. She stepped closer. "This position requires someone strong enough to handle pressure without emotional distractions. Someone who can lead aggressively. Someone who won't run home every time daycare calls. The words hit me like a punch. You think I can't do the job because I'm a father? I think, she said carefully, you've built your entire identity around surviving. Survival and leadership are not the same thing. I could feel employees watching us from nearby desks. Then she looked directly into my eyes and said, and judging by your file, you're probably not him. Something inside me snapped. Not anger exactly. Exhaustion. Years of being underestimated. Years of pretending everything was okay while carrying the weight of 2 lives on my shoulders. And that's when I gave the reply people in that office still talk about. I looked her dead in the eye and said, you keep saying you need a man by Monday. But what you actually need is someone who knows how to stay when life gets hard. The hallway went silent. Claire's expression changed instantly. I continued before fear could stop me. You think being a single father makes me weak? Every morning I wake up terrified I'll fail my daughter. I work until my body hurts because if I collapse, there's nobody else coming to save us. I've negotiated hospital bills at midnight. I've held my little girl while she cried herself to sleep, asking why her mother left. And then I still show up here every morning, doing work people above me couldn't handle. So if you want someone ruthless, hire somebody else. But if you want someone loyal enough to carry impossible weight without quitting, then I'm already that man. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Claire stared at me longer than I can describe. Then she quietly said, come into the conference room. Now before I tell you what happened next, I want you to think about something. Imagine standing in front of the most powerful person in your company knowing one wrong sentence could destroy your career forever. Would you have stayed silent to protect your job? Or would you have defended yourself the way I did? Seriously, comment below what you would have done in my position, because at that moment, I truly thought my life was about to fall apart. Inside the conference room, Claire closed the door slowly. Her face looked completely different now. Less guarded somehow. Then she said something I never expected. My father left when I was 8. I blinked, stunned. She walked toward the window overlooking downtown Chicago. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us alive. I watched her choose between groceries and electricity more times than I can count. She laughed bitterly. And somewhere along the way I convinced myself, emotions were liabilities, that needing people made you weak. I didn't know what to say. Then she turned toward me and asked quietly, do you know why I pushed you so hard? No. Because you reminded me of her. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she admitted something that explained everything. The board didn't want me promoted. They thought a single father would be unreliable in a high-pressure executive role. Claire had spent weeks defending me internally while simultaneously testing whether I could survive the pressure. You were right about one thing, she finally said. I don't need a ruthless man by Monday. She paused. I need someone human. Then she offered me the position. I wish I could say everything became perfect immediately after that. But life doesn't work that way. The promotion changed our finances overnight. For the first time in years, I stopped panicking every time my phone buzzed with a bank notification. Emma finally got her own bedroom instead of sleeping in the tiny converted dining area of our apartment. I bought her the dinosaur backpack she'd wanted for months. The first night in the new apartment, she hugged me so tightly I nearly cried. But the biggest surprise wasn't the money. It was Claire. Once we started working closely together, I saw parts of her nobody else in the company ever saw. She carried loneliness the same way some people carry expensive handbags, constantly, elegantly, and heavily. She ate most dinners alone in her office. She trusted nobody completely. Success had made her respected but not loved. One night after a brutal investor meeting, I found her sitting alone in the dark conference room staring at the city lights. You okay? I asked. She laughed softly. Do I look okay? Honestly, she didn't. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I took her to the little 24-hour diner near my apartment, where Emma and I used to eat when money was tight, because kids ate free on Thursdays. Claire looked horrified when we walked inside. This place has sticky menus, she whispered. Exactly, I said. Emma was with us that night, and within 20 minutes, She somehow convinced Claire to color with crayons while waiting for pancakes. I will never forget the image of one of the most feared CEOs in Chicago sitting in a diner booth, wearing a $1,000 blazer, while arguing with a 7-year-old about whether dinosaurs could play baseball. That was the first real smile I ever saw from her. Months passed. People at work started noticing changes in Claire too. She became less cold, more patient. She still demanded excellence, but she no longer treated vulnerability like weakness. Then one evening she confessed something heartbreaking. She said, "I built my whole life around proving. I didn't need anyone. But watching you with Emma made me realize surviving alone isn't the same thing as living." I didn't have some perfect movie-style response prepared. I just reached across the table and held her hand. And for the first time, she let someone. A year later, Emma stood between us in our kitchen while making pancakes completely covered in flour, and she looked up at Claire and asked, "So, are you staying forever?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," she whispered. "If your dad will let me." Emma screamed so loudly the neighbors probably heard her. Now, before people start assuming this story turned into some fairy tale, let me tell you something honestly. Relationships built after pain are complicated. Claire and I argued. We both carried scars. There were nights we struggled to communicate because we'd spent years surviving in completely different ways. But we learned something important together. Strength is not pretending you don't need people. Real strength is choosing to stay when life becomes inconvenient. Today, Emma is 9 years old. She still believes pancakes can solve emotional crises. Honestly, sometimes I think she's right. Claire still runs the company, except now employees aren't terrified to speak to her anymore. Last Christmas, she created childcare assistance programs for single parents across every department because she said nobody should have to choose between career and family. Sometimes I think back to that moment in the hallway when she said, "I need a man by Monday." At the time, it sounded cruel. But now I realize she wasn't talking about masculinity at all. She was talking about trust. She needed someone who wouldn't disappear when things got hard. Because everyone important in her life always had. And maybe I needed someone who could finally see me as more than a struggling single dad, barely keeping his head above water. Funny how life works like that. The people who seem strongest are often the loneliest. And the people barely surviving sometimes have the biggest hearts. So, if there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's that you should never underestimate someone just because they're exhausted. Sometimes exhausted people are carrying entire worlds on their backs without anybody noticing. And sometimes the smallest acts of kindness. A childcare gift card, pancakes at midnight, listening instead of judging, can completely change someone's life. If you were on my side in this story, make sure to like this video. And if you enjoy emotional stories like this one, subscribe to the channel because there are many more coming. Most importantly, I want to hear your opinion in the comments section. Do you think Claire was wrong for testing me the way she did? Or do you understand why she acted that way after everything she'd been through? Share your final thoughts on this whole mess below. Thank you for listening to my story. And until next time, I'll see you all in the next story.